All right, I'm going to reconvene this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board. Can I have a member certify closed session, please?
Madam Chair, I certify to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Mrs. Henley. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Riffle.
Mrs. Henley,
Aye.
Mr. Riffle,
Aye.
Dr. Cavazos,
Aye.
Ms. Chen,
Aye.
Mrs. Donner,
Aye.
Mr. Hosang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye. All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Riffle. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Henley. Ms. Olive?
Mr. Riffle,
Aye.
Dr. Cavazos,
Aye.
Ms. Chen,
Aye.
Mrs. Donner,
Aye.
Mr. Hosang,
Aye.
Mrs. Henley,
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye. All right, moving on to the public hearing on the FY25 operating budget, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Donner.
Madam Chair, we do not have any speaker cards for the public hearing.
Well, that was easy. Thank you. And we will move on to announcements and superintendent's report, followed by any board member reports if there are any.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first announcement is for high school students. The Career Connections Fair is on Thursday, 14th of March at Jamestown High School. At the Career Connections Fair, you can explore careers, learn about experiences like job shadowing, internships, co-ops, and mentorships, and connect with hiring managers and employees at companies and organizations from many different industries. No matter the post-secondary pathway, college, career training program, the workforce, or the military, the Career Connections Fair is a great resource and opportunity for our high school students. We look forward to seeing you there. This month is Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month. And on Saturday, March 16th, we celebrate it with a special event organised by the Special Education Department and Special Education Advisory Committee. All are welcome at the Family Festival Day at Lafayette High School. Activities include face painting, a petting zoo from the Teeny Tiny Farm, activities provided by the Williamsburg Regional Library, rock painting, and an opportunity to speak with community agencies. Make plans to see WJCC's award-winning fine arts teams this spring. Our musical season kicks off this weekend. Best wishes to the cast and crew from each school. All of the productions are up on the slide. Ticket information is available at wjccschools.org. These performances are not to be missed. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Are there any reports from board members?
I have a report
Okay.
from the Student Advisory Committee. Ms. Chen and I met with the students on February 21st, along with Dr. Worley and Ms. Mumpoint. And we have collective students from, of course, across the high schools. And it was great to introduce ourselves to them as the new board members that are sitting on the board and hearing about their conversation from last meeting, which was always moving us towards what do students do, what do teachers do, and how do we work as an administration, right? That kind of the goal that they set for as we move to the next 6 months of our time, and we'll meet one more time before they leave. And then they did a kind of activity based off attendance and how students can engage and kind of roll us back into kind of how do they want to see that progress move, right? It's good to kind of their pulse and voice in that conversation as we talk about attendance and deal with whether it's lack of attendance or to trying to get students to be in the classroom and be excited about learning. It was great to hear from their collaboration, and hopefully we'll have some of those things kind of move into our discussions as we move forward. But they were kind of we were just kind of scratching the surface and getting things moving. So, but it was good, yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Riffle and Ms. Chen. Or did you have something to add?
No, I didn't have anything to add to that, but I enjoyed meeting the students and getting to know the students from all the different, represented from all the different high schools. So,
All right, thank you, Ms. Chen. Any other reports Board members? Nope. Okay, then we will move to 6.01, preschool centers design update. And I think we have some virtual guests.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening I'm going to give you an update on the preschool centres design. In the fall of last year, the previous board had an opportunity to see the design of the pre-K centres, and we really wanted to bring back the design team so that our new board would get up to speed on the design, have a chance to look at it before we go forward for construction later on in the year. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Kiefer, who's going to introduce the item and our guest this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. As we patiently await the screen.
There we go.
As Dr. Heron mentioned, we were able to provide the board with an update in September of 2023, and some of you might also recall that there was a joint meeting presentation that occurred in December of 23. We thought it was appropriate to bring the design team back to the table to give the board a full briefing relative to the design process and where we are in the process. Joining us this evening are architects from BJ Upton and Associates, Blue Justice Upton Associates. It's Eddie Evans. He's on the call. Melissa Turnbaugh is from PBK, and Bailey Companion is from PBK. There is a copy of the presentation in board docs for you, and I want to turn it over to the presentation team. Melissa?
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us. I'm sorry we're not there in person, but it's wonderful to be there virtually. We have had the privilege of working with the entire team to pull this together. So for those that have had the privilege of seeing it, we have some updates. And then for those new board members, we're excited to share these exciting projects. I'm Melissa Turnbaugh. I'm a partner at PBK, and I'm joined with my colleague Bailey. Bailey, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am a principal with PBK, working with Melissa and Daniel and this great team on these pre-Ks.
Perfect. So I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about the history of these projects. Perfect. So we have been hard at work for almost a year now, which is so exciting in May, where we kicked off the project. We had a really collaborative design charrette with your team to kind of ideate of what are our goals and what are our visions for the project. We moved into schematic design, and kind of design development. This is really starting to kind of take the building blocks and put them together. Then we have continued to refine them thanks to the great feedback from your team. So we had lots of very intentional meetings talking about every inch and detail of the facility, from the importance of storage, the importance of materials, the importance of wayfinding. And so where we stand now is we are in the trenches of construction documents. We are busy at work with permitting and kind of jurisdictional conversations. We're exploring value engineering exercises. And so the next slide shows kind of visually this incremental step. You know, when we first started, we essentially had aerials of the existing sites. We had a building block, which was kind of the actual building program. And then thanks to your team and their great feedback, we rolled up our sleeves and started to kind of play with the parts and pieces of how this would come together. And so really what we're going to show you today is really a result of that great collaboration, not just in architectural character, but also in layout, and really hopefully prioritizing the needs of the kids and the needs of this campus. So as I mentioned, you know, this was part of our process. This was the design charrette. And the design charrette, we started with words and creating a visioning session. You know, this project will be a success if, and you know, what is the vision? And this is such a neat campus. It's such a special age, but it's also so inclusive. And we wanted to make sure that the statement at the bottom is really our vision statements. It's our accountability check that when we are making decisions and when we are done with this project, that we want to make sure that, you know, this is innovative, it is inclusive, it is sensory rich, it has natural light, and it is accessible to all of these kids. We did site diagramming. We actually physically arranged pieces together and had a really collaborative pair of days that we solicited great feedback from your team. following that, we got to work and we took that great feedback. We continued to have additional meetings and we started to actually put the building together, at taking all of the great comments we had heard from the design charrette and then making sure that it functionally worked on the site, that we had appropriate site circulation, parent stacking, bus stacking, and started to also make sure that we were being respectful of, we're on existing elementary school sites. And so with the nuances of what that looked like, not only for construction, but being respectful of their space and their site circulation. And then we got into kind of more of the design development. So the next level of refinement, we started to have discussions about materials, outdoor space, types of environments we wanted to make sure we created on the campus. And so we had lots of great detailed meetings to have this dialogue, making sure that everything we were doing was really intentional, and really met the needs of the campus. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bailey. She's going to tell you a little bit about each site and kind of where we landed.
Yes. So as Melissa mentioned, these pre-K buildings are going to go on existing elementary school sites. This particular one that we're showing is Claire Bird Baker. The new Bright Beginnings building will go in the corner along Ironbound. So the goal is a bus loop in the back with a parent loop in the front, so completely separated for the safety of the kids, and then staff parking in front of the building. The next site is at Norge Elementary School. So this one, we have placed the building in the very back of the site. Again, a separate bus loop and parent loop so that those two drop-off zones can be completely separated. And then parking in the back and the front of Norge. Getting into the actual building, we worked really hard, at the beginning during the charrette, we came up with like a materiality kind of scheme that everybody felt really comfortable with, and we've developed it from there. The goal of the building is to keep everything at a small residential scale for the kids. Since these are younger students, we want them to feel comfortable coming to school. We want it to seem familiar to them so that they don't feel out of place at their new building. So the main entry, keeping everything small, we're using warmer materials and red brick and then a wood grain kind of paneling that kind of keeps everything natural and familiar for the students. Their playgrounds at this school we think are really unique and really amazing. All of them are accessible. So in between these classroom zones, they have their own courtyards that would be playgrounds for the students. So again, they're going to be 100% accessible. They're going to have sensory elements and play equipment for ages 2 all the way to 4 and 5. And then this is just another one of the smaller ones, kind of a different view, different equipment in that courtyard. The individual classrooms, again, we want to keep everything familiar, keep it colorful for the kids. There's writable surfacing that they can go draw on. There's tackable surface that we can display their art. And lots of storage, we heard from the district, was a key component to the success of this school. So you can see that incorporated into these classrooms. The corridors as well, we heard wayfinding was really important for our younger students. So we're kind of using the walls as a learning tool, using the floors as a learning tool. These kids will be able to interact with the building in any spot that they are in. And then there is one room in the school, we're calling it a multi-purpose room. It's for the overall campus to use. So true to its name, it is multi-purpose. We're expecting, the teachers to be able to have meetings in there. If it's a rainy day, you'll be able to bring classes in there. They'll be able to run around and ride their tricycles on the track and just have a big open space for it to be used in multifaceted ways. Another view of it.
And so while we can fly through this quite quickly, it has been really the culmination of a lot of hard work and a lot of great collaboration thanks to your team Our next big milestone, like I mentioned at the beginning, we are in the trenches of construction documents. And so making all of the imagery a reality, and having all of the appropriate technical specifications. Our next big milestone is to come back to you with kind of our value engineering updates. We want to make sure that we are also being good stewards with your resources and finding ways, if we can, to be as economical as possible, while not hindering and impacting the learning environments in the outdoor space. And so that's kind of where we stand today. We look forward to seeing you again in just a little over a month. But I guess we can turn it over to you and see if you have any questions for us, and that we'd be happy to answer.
Melissa, we appreciate the presentation, and before we open it up for questions, I did just want to mention, by way of a reminder for the full group, these two campuses are designed to accommodate approximately 250 pre-K students per building. Right now, we are in the 389, 390, 399 range in terms of the number of pre-K students that we host. There are 18 classrooms in each of the buildings currently in the design process. Just wanted to kind of give you that additional context as you think about the design presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Keever. And thank you, Ms. Turnbaugh. Board members, do we have any questions for our presenters, especially new board members? This is probably pretty new for you. Mr. Hosang?
Just one quick question. Looking at the documents, it appears these buildings are identical. Is that actually true?
That is correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yes.
I think for the purpose of the conversation, it was our intent to be able to do that all along, is to use a prototype or use the same design, which thereby saving some money, we hope. The challenge I think that we've all talked about during the course of this process is the ensuring that it fits on the campus. And I think that the architectural team and the engineering team have really put us in a good place to be able to get that accomplished.
And that's what I was asking for, because I was kind of surprised that you could fit the same exact building into two separate places. So I just wanted to confirm that.
That's our plan.
Thank you.
Yeah. If I could add to that, Mr. Hussain, that it's one of the biggest challenges because these sites were made for one elementary school. And so without an alternative land, piece of land to put it on, we are actually force fitting these buildings onto the site, and the architect has done a great job of making that happen visually for us, and we believe it's possible.
Any other questions from board members out there?
If I could just add,
Yes,
Ms. Ortega, the main purpose of this evening is just to give you a sense of where we've been, to give you a chance to look at it as a new board so that you're aware of what's happening and some of the steps involved, so that when we start to move forward with value engineering and then going for construction, you'll feel you've got some of the information you need to make decisions later on.
And can you just remind everyone how many classrooms? You've said how many students will go into the preschool spaces, but how many classrooms will be freed up across the division?
I believe there's 33 or 34. We added one, Mr. Walker. 32 classrooms right now, pre-K, in our elementary schools. And of course, we have many classrooms in trailers right now too. 24?
That's probably, we have 13, I believe, trailers, so close to 24 total. As we continue this process, Dr. Heron, as we've talked about previously, it will entail some redistricting effort on behalf of the school division, looking to ensure that we have appropriate balance in our elementary schools as we're able to move pre-K students from 5 distinct locations to 2 more central locations. Divest ourselves of the portable classrooms, move students back into the building, and reapportion the classrooms where pre-K students currently are into elementary classrooms. That will take another layer of work on behalf of the board and administration and understanding from the community as we go through that process.
Right. And the goal is that we would no longer have any trailers at any elementary school once this is complete?
I think that would be the goal. However, realistically, our pre-K space in classrooms in schools right now is full. And when we move into the new building, we already have students on a waiting list ready to go into the pre-K centre. When we move all of the classrooms from trailers back into the building, our elementary schools will be almost full as well.
Thank you. Any last thoughts from the board?
I'm just excited looking at the pictures as a early childhood person, and I hope they get all the fluff and all the wonderful things we see there, and I can't wait to break ground and go to the open house when it's all ready and up and running, because it looks beautiful and inviting for children.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Well, how will this impact like students who are attending these elementary schools during construction? I'm assuming this will be done during the school year. It's not like you can avoid doing this all in the summer.
It will be an occupied construction. The construction site will be cordoned off, fenced off, so that there won't be a need for interaction between construction and the current school.
Could we use the same fence for, like, save money by using the same fence for construction as to like keep the schools apart? Because I see like in the green space area that's going to be occupied in both of these school documents. I'm just like, is it been thought out as like, I know there's construction fences and there's like, security fences that we put out. Is there like a way to kind of mesh the two? And
Well, I think that initially in the construction project, you want a certain type of fencing to keep the construction behind. I don't necessarily think that's the fencing that you want to delineate or mark property in between the two schools. So I think it's a shared piece of property, not necessarily cordoned off the pre-K center away from the other building, if that makes sense. If you're asking about will the fencing remain when the construction concludes?
I guess I'm just looking at like most of the diagrams involve like roads that separate the schools. So it's like you're going to have to put those there so like students who are going to elementary school playground aren't going onto bus lanes and that stuff's happening, right? So it's like making that happen at the same time makes sense. I don't know. I know it's kind of like more of a high, like it's not my job. It's definitely not yours either. But it's just thinking about like we're trying to like effectively do this. It's like I don't know. I just would like to.
We're going to create scenarios.
One purchase thing would be great.
Right. We're going to create scenarios at both campuses during the course of construction where the current elementary school students do not need to be involved anywhere near the construction project.
All right. Anything else? Well, we thank everyone on the Ballou, Justice Upton, and PBK team for all of your work and for joining us this evening with a great presentation and getting us up to speed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. All right. Now we will move on to 6.02. Discussion of the fiscal year 2025 operating budget. I believe Mrs. Hunley has a statement to read.
All right, finger work. It's not there.
All right. We will. For 1 second. Just a few minutes. Someone needs to find a way to play some Jeopardy music or something.
Do I refresh or? Refresh. What do I do to refresh? What do I do to refresh? Okay, thanks. There it is. Okay. As a member of the School Board of Williamsburg, James City County, I acknowledge that I may have an interest in the FY25 school budget because my husband is an employee of the WJCC schools. However, I believe I am able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you, Mrs. Hunley.
I should be able to memorize that by now.
That's true.
All right, Dr. Heron?
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. We don't have a formal presentation this evening because we provided all of the information on the budget already, and I know staff have answered a lot of questions that the board have asked about the budget as well, and we've tried to provide all of those answers to you. I did put in some information out of your seats tonight, which gives a general comparison of the governor's budget, the House appropriations, and the Senate Finance Committee appropriations. It's really for information only. The numbers are not final. There's no final numbers to actually present. But of note that the House budget would potentially give us 1.5 million more, and the Senate budget would provide us 4.7 million more. That's just in rounded numbers on the back of the handout. And that's really just as a background to discussion this evening, because the budget that was presented as the superintendent's budget was based on $112,000 additional dollars, and we should potentially get a lot more from that from the state. So in that frame tonight, there's an opportunity for the board to have a final discussion on the budget.
Thank you. Board members, are there any questions or comments that you have at this time? I know we've all been emailing questions. Are there any questions that you've emailed that you'd like to bring up publicly?
Is this the point? I had mentioned something about there's a person that works, I think, in the communications division.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a proposed increase of a half of a FTE for this position, and I was going to recommend that we go to a full position.
Yes, sir. So at the moment we have a community liaison position in the budget where we're trying to clone the person we have already, who's our person that liaises with non-English speaking families. And Dr. Quasso was suggesting to the board, would you want to consider making that a whole position rather than a 0.5?
Is there any discussion on that? Any thoughts on that, Mrs. Donner?
I guess I would like to know the superintendent and view on what is the demand, and is there demand for a full FTE?
I believe there's a demand for it. I think the 0.5 was a step towards a full-time position, and that was mainly based on the fact that we contract out with a second person to do a number of hours right now. But Ms. Wall may want to add a little bit more to that because that position is in her department.
Certainly, yes, there is a demand. Some of the numbers that I could pull up that we had discussed during this conversation earlier in the year related to the various tasks and services that our liaison currently supports. That includes incoming registrations, IEP meetings, child find meetings, many things in the special ed realm. And then any sort of question, he told me today that a family had texted him about kindergarten registration for the coming school year. So he is absolutely the point person, and we would quickly find time to fill both a half-time and a full-time position.
So would it be your recommendation or support that we go to a full-time person versus a half?
I could be so bold to request that, certainly. As Dr. Heron had mentioned, we are paying a second person currently hourly, and they are roughly equivalent to a 0.5 FTE, and their day is full as well.
It seems to me that the organization would have more continuity and more of a collegiality between two employees versus a contracted person and a person who's on staff. I mean, you're taking on an extra FTE, but at least they could work together. I mean, when I speak to George and he tells me, and some days he's just registering, multiple students, and one day they did 26, and I know at James River that population has exponentially grown. So,
I think with regard to process, we wouldn't recommend at this point because the superintendent's budget has been presented to the school board, and so really it now becomes the school board to take your suggestion and recommendation and to talk about it, and then if you wish to amend my recommendation in the superintendent's budget, that would be your prerogative to do so.
Is there anyone want to have a discussion on Dr. Cavazos' proposal?
What page is this position on in the budget book? I just want to know what we're looking at. Like, 'cause, you said 0.5, and what is that
What is it?
number? How much
It'll
is
be
it?
referenced in all of the new things in the couple of pages at the beginning of the budget. You'll notice all of the new adds to this year's budget, and I believe from memory, it's about 45,000.
Correct.
What would the cost implication of a full-time?
Double that.
90?
Plus, you're probably talking benefits as well. I'm not sure if that includes benefits or not.
Dr. Heron, I believe that we found it on page 91 of the book.
Okay.
It's also on
It should be in the very beginning in the summary.
9 and 10 list all the expenditure increases. And it is,
And that position also falls under object code 1140 if you're looking at page 44 of the budget book.
So in effect, you're doubling the cost, and again, is this a priority you'd wish to add to the budget if money is available, which we don't know yet, of course.
Well, it just seems to me that the population is growing, and Mr. Rivas is, from what I understand, extremely busy, and he's very well respected by all staff members. And honestly, we had discussions about this, and he thought that it would be a good idea, but I would support that wholeheartedly. And I think if this population of students continues to grow, then we need somebody who's going to be part of the team versus somebody who's tangential. And so I think this needs to be solidified. We're talking $45,000. We're not talking $450,000. It may be a big rounding error, but maybe that's not how it's received. I'm not sure. I've only been here 2 months.
well, I think it's been made clear that there's obviously a need, and that's up to this board if we want to add that additional request, especially if we find out we're getting more money from the state. In addition to that idea, we've also seen numbers on surrounding counties and divisions, and numbers that we think that they're going to propose in terms of raises and salary increases. We received a chart that shows where, stay at 3%, where we would fall if all the surrounding divisions go with the numbers that they seem to be indicating now. And just wondered if board members had any thoughts on those numbers, and if we wanted to. There is additional money from the state if there's any interest in increasing the salary request.
If I could just add for public information for those listening tonight, York County has presented their budget and have proposed a 5.5% increase for all staff. And Poquoson has presented their budget and proposed a 5% for all staff.
Mr. Riffle?
Sure. I think it would be a smart goal to go for 5. It seems like the House and Senate will provide somewhere between 3 and 4, and then of course that comes half from the locality, right? So, I think you should ask for a budget of expected need, right? Instead of I think that's important to if we're seeing numbers from the county anyways that are saying employees receive more money, we should kind of reach for it as well. I would not want to hear from our employees or from the superintendent that we're not treating our employees fairly, even though other people across the county and the cities are receiving more. So,
Mrs. Hundley?
Yes, I'd also like to go, if not 5 or higher, only because looking at the one chart of where our teachers are in different steps, depending on if they have bachelor's, master's, or master's plus 30, and where the other divisions are, and it's clear steps 15 to 25 is where we will probably tend to have people jump to the other because they're more competitive. And I'm talking anywhere between $6,000 to $10,000. So I think we have to be higher than the highest person, even if it's by 1%.
So how much money are you talking about? I mean, if we go from 3 to 5, that's substantial.
Yes. So each percent is about 1.3 million, and so that's what it's a percentage across the board to increase. And just in response to Ms. Handley, that's why we've started this several-year progression of adding to the scale, and we're actually investing 1.5 million in that this year, along with specific points on the support scale. So I think it's good we're starting to differentiate and do that over the next 2 or 3 years.
If I may ask, does this chart reflect the step increases as well?
Mr. Baker, I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am. It is, it's what we proposed and what our neighbors that we know of, what they proposed.
That's 3% plus the step.
Correct, at the targeted areas. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Jose?
Do we know what York County and Poquoson did last year in terms of raises?
7% as well.
I'm sorry?
7% as well, from what I understand. Mr. Baker, if you'd confirm that for me.
Yes, ma'am. I think York did like 5, and then in the middle of the year, and then they did another 2. And I apologize, they did 5 to start the year, and then 2 in the middle of the year, ultimately for 7%. So most of our neighbors all did 7% too.
If you remember, our budget was very late in coming last year, and we were well into the year, and the county stepped out and gave us the money to do 7% at the beginning of the year. Then when the General Assembly came through, everyone else followed and ended up in the 7% range, an average of 7.
Any other thoughts or questions from the board? Mrs. Donner?
I too, as I'm looking, as Mrs. Hunley said, we are getting beat by significant amounts of money. I mean, across the board, but particularly with our masters and our masters plus 30. And even with our bachelors, like you said, as we get above. And so I am concerned that if at a 3%, we are not keeping pace. I mean, we've continually been able to match, but we haven't gained any ground over the last few years because we keep matching what everyone else is doing. So I think we need at least a 4, if not a 5%.
Mr. Riffle?
I think if I could, I think it's interesting to, as we talked about that, but the support cap, like if say, for example, it's the first time it's ever been in a budgetary cycle given by a full chamber like that, I think it's like, this is a real conversation we're having here across Virginia. And for us to kind of not prepare ourselves for potentially even getting half of that or a quarter would be kind of a downfall on our board. I think you're seeing things that are unprecedented in the history of our state because they had JLARC studies, they had things that people have been asking for a while. So I just think I think if you're going to speak on this type of stuff, you should read those reports and then speak on those things because you're kind of going against the grain on a lot of what the chambers and even the governor would have produced if he didn't want to stick his hands in so many pots. So.
I also agree with everything that's been said. I think 5% makes sense. We should ask for that. Make a change to the proposal if we can.
Can I ask what the healthcare differential would then be if we were saying 5% across the board versus 3%? You know, we kind of looked at charts at what that would do to certain people at different levels.
I think we'd have to take time to produce those charts again because we do it all, by individual employee, and then we can produce those to show you what that would do on the graph, which we haven't done for tonight.
And then, is there anyone that wants to talk? We have been hearing from people about the healthcare situation. Honestly, in terms of hearing from staff, we've only heard about healthcare, not additional salary increases. So I just want to acknowledge that and throw that out for discussion. I asked this afternoon what the cost of what the additional cost would be to cover employees at the current proportion. There was about 1.3 million. Is that correct? If we kept it the way it is with the additional 9% of healthcare costs, that would cost us 1.3.
Yes, if the division took on the increase, the total increase in the healthcare and didn't pass it on to the employee, it would be 1.3. That's my understanding, Mr. Baker.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Just to remind the board, 30% of our staff don't take our healthcare. So if we do that, it's a great thing as well. But not every employee benefits from that because 30% don't take our healthcare. So if you have a percentage raise, it's 1.3. If you take on all the healthcare, it's 1.3. But more employees benefit from the actual raise.
And do the employees benefit more? The employees that do have the insurance, do they benefit more from a raise than the health insurance cost, or is it? I guess it depends on I know it depends on the plan. it's so hard to.
I think the philosophy has been, and these are not easy decisions, but you put more in the pocket of an employee and you allow them to make their choice of plan, rather than say we'll pay for everybody's plan or pay more of that. Mr. Baker, if you want to jump in, please do.
Yes, ma'am. And we did do a staff survey. We had over 1,000 of our own employees respond, and they overwhelmingly responded. 79% said that they wanted the salary increase for all staff as their top budget priority. And so that was over 1,000 of our employees, over 79% of the respondents of that survey. And healthcare was one of the other choices, even less so.
I think that it would be helpful to see the chart that we've seen with the line and the bottom and the top, and to see how what would be a best case scenario, worst case scenario for an employee at different levels. If we could see that for other numbers, it's hard to visualize. What's the? I guess we want to know what's the worst case scenario that someone would be in with the change in healthcare costs.
With the 5%,
At these at a very different increase. Right. Are there any other questions on the budget?
I guess one more question. Representing the healthcare, actually, I would we be open to moving to have more paid days off, or what would that situation look like? Because that's something that wasn't included in this budget, and it's a benefit I think our employees would want. Who receive healthcare, who don't. That's just we're talking about who is benefiting, who's not. Like that'd be something every employee would benefit from, and this is a place to put that in discussion.
I think it would probably be a next year discussion at this point, because it would mean a change in every employee's contract. We'd have to do an analysis of that. But if you think of every employee and one more paid day, that equals a certain amount of
Right.
money. That is pretty substantial across our division. I don't have that exact number right now. I don't know if anyone else has. No, everybody's going like this. So
It's a tough one.
It's not in my head right now.
That's kind of like the balance I think we have to kind of consider here, right? Is like some things may not benefit, like you doing the 70% 30, right? Is not for everybody, but those things do, and that's like if it might be better to consider some of those options as well if we're kind of struggling on that type of fence, as we move forward. So,
and I think it depends if you. It seems like you can give that and it doesn't cost, but it actually costs a numbers of days of work. So it is real money, but it's presented in a very different form, obviously.
Mrs. Hunley, you had your hand
Yes,
up?
I know. We just got an email from Mr. Kaysen on the survey that the Education Association did on healthcare, and it's very thorough. It's a lot to read, but it's clear. It was clear to me that employees do pick the one they want according to their needs of their family or health needs. They don't quite understand Centera yet, so the not job fair, but the health fair that Mr. Baker you talked about, that we can break down Centera, because I think some might look there, but they just wanted to make sure they were getting apples for apples. They could keep certain doctors, their out-of-pocket pay wasn't going to jump. So I'm sure some of you, I think it just came yesterday or today. So
Came
I'm
today.
sure a lot of people haven't been able to see it, but it clearly is the voice of many, many teachers on what they feel about healthcare. So I'm hoping that gets shared around because that's that'll be very important in our decision making.
Thank you, Mrs. Hunley. I think that was passed to me today, and I'll certainly make sure HR is aware of it. And I believe our efforts to educate on all of our plans is coming soon, Mr. Baker.
Yes, ma'am. I think tentatively for benefits fair on April the 25th, but we also have a lot of information and literature that we share side by side. The Centera plan is a very rich, very strong plan.
All right, does anyone have any other questions or comments? Feedback, Mr. Jose?
Just one quick question. Is there an open season for the different healthcare companies?
The open enrollment?
Yes.
Yeah, it's for the fall, but it's in August when we do open enrollment for this fall, and it starts October 1.
Okay, so the employees would have time to
yes, sir.
determine what
Yeah,
they're looking at.
Correct, so that any choices they're making are for October 1 of 2024. And we've also, they have a lot of time.
So can we get I think a few people have indicated that they would, support asking for additional funds. If anyone else would like to indicate where they are, I know we're just talking about it now for the first time. One other question that I have is, of course, we're all waiting for the magic number from the state, and we feel like we know the minimum. So that minimum, I think we could say even without changing our ask from the county, we could add an additional % pretty safely. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, I think there's a certain amount of certainty. It's not complete. It's not final. That there will be more money coming from the state. We just don't know how much. It's somewhere between 1.5 and 4.7. It could be anywhere in that mix.
Right, but 1.5 would certainly cover an additional %.
Absolutely.
Without changing the ask of the county.
Correct. Not changing our current ask. That's correct.
So then,
$45,000 is going to make a big difference.
I'm sorry?
My proposal? I mean, I don't understand.
no, we're not saying
motion
your
to it,
proposal
yeah.
wasn't valid.
You didn't motion, so.
Well, I'm not a Robert's Rule wonk, okay? I really don't understand it all. I mean, that hasn't been in my life.
Yeah.
So just please tell me where am I with this?
Yep. So I think where we are is I can't change because my budget's there, but the board collectively, as Ms.
understand
Ortego
that.
solicits opinions on all of the things we've discussed tonight,
Right.
we'll get a straw poll of the board as to whether or not to amend my budget to include the position, to raise the salary, or to look at health care, to get some direction from the board tonight. Then when we come to vote at the next meeting,
Can
we'll all
incorporate
have a sense of where we're going.
Thank you. I wasn't sure.
So this is just sort of getting discussion with people's thoughts and ideas, and I thought we had discussed yours and
No. I'm happy with that.
Okay,
I just
okay.
wasn't sure.
we weren't ignoring it, but
No. I'm just
what
curious
my
whether-
point was that without changing our ask of the county, we could at least ask for 4%. We feel comfortable that the additional state funding will at least cover that. So should we ask for 5 in the case that we do get more from the state, and then we've asked for it, at least we're set up to receive it. So that's what I'm putting out there for people to nod or shake their heads at.
Makes sense to me.
Yes.
I
Mrs.
just have
Donner?
a clarification. I mean, because Dr. Heron has to come in with a number. So are we saying 4 or are we saying 5?
I'm saying 5. For me,
Well, we can go. Mrs. Donner, what would you feel comfortable with understanding that you're not voting and this is not binding?
This is debate.
I am comfortable with 4. If it's the will of the board and the majority of the board wants 5, I can support it.
Dr. Cavazos, you're good with 4. Ms. Chen,
I'd like to see us do 5.
Mr. Riffle,
Yeah, I think 5 is pretty much where I think the state will hit, so.
Mr. Jose?
I will be looking at what the state does. I mean, if the state can gives us 4, then it'd be 4. If the state gives us 5, then could go with 5. But I am very leery, and I think I've mentioned this in a previous meeting, about going to our funding partners with an extremely high figure just because we feel like it, and thinking they're just going to go a little bit below that. Our teachers deserve, don't get me wrong, our teachers deserve 10% each year. My father was a high school teacher for 35 years. I know what the teachers have gone through and are going through. I just have a problem that we're trying to spend money that we don't have. It'd be much easier if we had all the money and we knew what we could go forward with. But we're not in a perfect world. So we've got to go forward with the best that we can. But I just don't like going to our funding partners crying wolf with a high amount, thinking that they're going to come just a little bit below that.
So I think we will absolutely get some more money from the state. We also are aware from our latest liaison meeting that the county is doing a fairly intense study of all of its employees, and there is a strong possibility they're going to be in the same range that we're talking about. Not decided, just starting to walk through their budget process. It's a long way off. But there is a possibility they'll be able to give us more than they normally do. No amount stated. I think the hard bit is we're going to be voting on a budget before we know. Mm-hmm. And so if we go in at 3, we probably will do our employees a disservice at the end of the day. If we go in at 5 and there's only 4% available, then we take up the budget comes back to us, we take a percentage off the top end and we sit on 4 once we're told what funding's available. I think we're caught in this position that we don't want to ask too little and we don't want to ask too much. Mm-hmm. And so I do think 5 is not 10%. We asked for 10 last year. I think it's a reasonable ask considering we're going to get additional state money. If I'd known all of that prior to presenting my budget, I would have probably put the ask up and not had the same discussion tonight.
And part of also my concern is what you had said, ma'am, that this funding partners usually give us approximately 2.5%.
About 2.5%, but I don't know if you've got.
And this year we're asking for much more than that. So.
It would be about 5 million and plus other pieces as well. I do know all of our real estate assessments have just gone up, and I believe that will add money to the county's budget.
It should.
and I'm a very happy taxpayer if some can come back to public education.
It's also half, right? Like, so we're not paying 5%, we're paying 2.5% locally. That's what it would be, so.
Correct, if we get the state funding.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to continue because we hadn't gotten to Mrs. Hunley yet.
Well, I'm competitive. I like to hang with the big dog. The big dog's going 5.5, but I will scale back to 5.
Okay. And I'll just say real quick, Mr. Hosang, I remember being in that same position. I think I even said in a board meeting, why are we even having this conversation if we don't know what the state is going to do? So I understand why that feels like, oh, we're spending money we don't have. What it's allowing us to do is basically have an allowance for a certain amount. It doesn't mean that money is gone if the state funding doesn't come through. It just means that it's easier to drop down than to then amend up. But we can't do that once we approve a budget. So it's just providing an allowance or essentially permission for us to receive more should more come our way. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So I would say, at a minimum 4 and certainly would support 5 if that's where the board wants to go, especially given the fact that we do think that the county is considering similar numbers. We certainly wouldn't want our teachers to get a significantly less of a raise than other county employees only because we didn't ask. If there are other factors and there's less money coming our way than we thought, then that's a different situation. But so that's where I feel just as an individual board member.
So, Madam Chair, I think we have some members on 5 and some on 4. As we go into the budget next week, we may want to understand where the majority are leaning on the board, because we'll be presenting the numbers in the budget for you to amend my budget and add on whatever percentage you wish to add on
Right.
as a board, and also the potential for the 0.5 position as well, if the board wishes to go there.
Right, we will certainly, I think we've gotten a general sense of where people are, and I don't want anyone to feel unduly pressured at this moment, since we're just talking about it, but I think we will continue to have conversations over the next few days.
Could we do a round of support for the position, just to get it? I don't know if everyone's generally. I'm supportive of it. We didn't do that part.
Sure,
I
can we
think
get
maybe
see
that's
where
part.
people are leaning on Dr. Cavazos' suggestion? Mrs. Donner, Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Mr. Riffle, Mr. Hosang?
Yes.
Mrs. Hunley?
Yes.
And I would support that as well. So we will certainly look into that.
Dr. Rogers got 7 votes. 7 nods. Yeah, it really is a much needed position. So thank you, sir.
All right, I'm looking around. Are we ready to wrap this up and move on?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a yes. Then we will move on to some proposed agenda items. 7.01, review security camera upgrades.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ortego. Mr. Weaver, our coordinator of security, is going to present this item this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Heron. We bring this agenda item to ask for your consideration and approval at the next meeting for updating and replacement of security cameras at 14 of our facilities in support of Goal 4, Safety and Security, and Goal 6, Organizational Efficiency and Effectiveness. Williamsburg, James City County Public Schools is committed to strong safety and security measures on all campuses. Each year, there is a systemic review of security cameras to ensure WJCC has maximum coverage and video support across the school division. This camera project will replace older cameras with newer, more effective IP cameras. Total cost for this project will be $245,665, and funding is available through the fiscal year 22 year-end spending plan. The purchase would be made using our current contract we have in place with Optech. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are these infrared cameras?
I'm sorry?
Will we have infrared ability with these cameras?
These will not, as the majority will be interior cameras.
Okay. Point back to Ms. Huntley talked about parking lot cameras, and I think it's something we should consider for doing upgrades to have cameras have visibility. So I appreciate the interior part.
Other questions from board members?
We have a breakdown of. Okay, we do. Okay, sorry.
There's a project breakdown attached.
It's not loading for me. I was like, is it more than this? So.
Were you going to ask at which schools or?
It's just not loading. So I'm sorry.
Oh.
Never mind.
The 14 locations are in the attachment.
Yeah. All right. It doesn't sound like there are a lot of questions. So we will. This will be up for approval next meeting.
My apologies, Mr. Weaver. It's Supervisor of School Safety and Emergency Management, not Coordinator. My apologies for that.
All right. 7.02, review purchase request of laptops from Lenovo for elementary student use.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ladders is going to present this item this evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Heron. This item is to ask for your consideration of and approval at the next meeting of purchasing replacement laptops for student use in support of our ongoing technology refresh cycle. The Department of Technology annually refreshes approximately 1/4 of our staff and student laptops on a 4-year refresh cycle, in order to maintain warranty and serviceability, as well as compatibility with required applications and network functionality. This past January, the board approved our initial purchase for this year's refresh, and with this purchase, we will complete the needed procurements for the year. The purchase request will provide 752 Chromebook laptops for elementary student use. The purchase does include extended warranty and services for a total purchase price of $324,864. The purchase will be made using the NCPA Omnia contract, excuse me, with Lenovo. Allergies are getting to me.
Oh, have some water.
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board members? No questions on this one? Nobody? I have a question. What is, and if I should know this, I'm sorry. What is our total annual expenditure on laptops and devices?
We have budgeted approximately 1.5 million, 6 million. I believe it's 1.6 million annually.
Okay, so that incorporates all the different refreshes at the various points in the year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you happen to know how much of that is just elementary?
Oh, not off the top of my head, but I can certainly find that for you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. It looked like you were mulling a question. No? Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Landers.
You're welcome.
7.03, review request for granting of permanent easement at War Hill High School.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Snipes is going to present this item this evening.
Good evening, School Board Chair, School Board members, and Dr. Herron. Tonight's proposed agenda item supports Goal 3 of the strategic plan and is being brought forward for your consideration and review. It's a request for granting a permanent easement at War Hill High School to Virginia Electric and Power Company, also DBA as Dominion Energy Virginia. As in fiscal year 22, the War Hill High School Auxiliary Gym was approved in the capital improvement plan, and the easement will provide Dominion Energy and grant them access to ingress and egress to prepare conduits, cables, and perform maintenance over the course of, again, perpetually. This will be at no cost to the school board, and the timing of the easement is critical to maintaining the overall project schedule of construction of the War Hill Auxiliary Gym. The superintendent recommends that the school board review this request for the permanent easement and be able to vote and be prepared to vote at the regular meeting on March 19th, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Snipes. Any questions from the board? Quick question for me. It's obviously in the title permanent easement, so this is not just for construction purposes.
No, this is permanent. This is perpetual because they will need to be able to come on to the site if there are any repairs that need to be done to their conduit or cable, which they are running
that's
to
what
the
you just
gym.
said. Okay. All right, thank you. I think that's it. I think that we're good. Thank you, Mr. Snipes. All right, we'll move on to some policies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Keever will take us through the policies as always this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Agenda item 801, revision to policy EBB, threat assessment teams. This policy was last revised in 2018. Our attempt administratively and then working with the policy committee to bring forward these recommendations were related to some change in state code and a better alignment with respect to the VSBA model policy. The state code requirement has changed with respect to threat assessment to mandate the inclusion of a school resource officer if said school resource officer is a member of the school community. And also there's a training component that's now required based on Virginia code. Our policy needed to be revised, and the fact that VSBA had made that revision to align with the code, we felt like these changes were appropriate. So you'll see a lot of new language, but that new language is related to the code pieces.
Thank you, Dr. Keever. Board members, are there any questions or comments on this? I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to have him move on.
Thank you. Agenda item. It's good for me to look at the screen.
8.02.
8.02. Okay, great.
Sorry.
Perfect. Let's see. EEBA, authorized use of vehicles. This policy was last revised in February of 2019. There is not a corresponding VSBA model policy. There our attempt at revising this policy was twofold. One, we want to continue to be able to utilize what we call fleet vehicles or vehicles for school division employees who need to be able to have transport. At the same time, the way the policy was worded was overly specific with respect to names of particular titles and responsibilities. We felt like that information there from line 22 to line 49 was best captured in a regulation. So what you'll see this evening is the policy revision, the inclusion of line 20, which is a new line authorizing the superintendent to develop a regulation, and then the subsequent, in board docs, subsequent regulation that we would bring forward as well is included there for you.
Thank you, Dr. Keever. Any questions on this one? Mr. Riffle?
Would this make it easier for you, Dr. Herring? It seems like you have a lot of responsibility now. You're the one basically authorizing all the personnel to operate machinery.
I would, usually there's a delegation piece where others are monitoring some of these pieces for me, Mr. Riffle, but thank you for looking out for me.
So watching your play here, you know. Like.
All right, any other questions? All right, let's move on.
Yes, ma'am.
8.03.
Policy GA. This is agenda item 803. This item really is a couple with 804, and let me sort of explain the rationale as I go through that. I will talk specifically about GA and then reference 804 as well. Our current policy GA, personnel policy goals, was last revised in 2019. And at that time met very specifically the standard of the VSBA model policy, talking about the responsibility that school personnel have to not provide assistance for people earning certain jobs. So as we began to look at our employment policies and personnel policies, organizationally, we felt like it was critical to have, in essence, an overarching employee conduct policy. One that we could point to at the very front of our policy manual that outlined responsibilities, expectations of our staff in terms of how they handle themselves. That's not a policy that we specifically had. We're bringing that forward. We're taking brand new language from line 10 down through line 146 and adding that to policy GA. I also want to note that on line 61, I believe that we missed a not. So we'll be adding in the word not on line 61 so that policy reads must not engage in any behaviors or interactions with students in person or through communication channels. So we'll make that change. We do feel like it is particularly important to have an overarching employee conduct policy and would recommend the board adopt this. As we were talking about the revision to the next agenda item, which is 804, non-instructional use of social media, and looking at the language of that particular policy, we felt like that policy could be retired because the language from GBBD is included relative to our employee conduct policy and expectations that we have of staff for interaction with students via social media channels. So I've combined both of those policies together, but I wanted to give the context for what we are trying to accomplish in the revision of GA and the subsequent suggestion to retire GBBD.
Thank you, Dr. Keever. Are there any questions? I know that was kind of a lot to piece together. Any questions from the board, Mr. Riffle?
Will this be made known to personnel through the change? If there's like any drastic changes from what we're basically retiring, what we're inserting into?
Yeah,
this is conduct. So.
There'll be a plan to communicate the new policy after every policy review and update. Dr. Keever sends a memo to principals to make schools aware of changes, and certainly if there's significant changes, we'll make them broadly known as well. Dr. Keever, have you anything to add to that?
And that's absolutely correct. And in some cases, we even do specific staff awareness around the policies. So as an example, we spent some time this summer looking at some of the new policies related to curriculum instruction, and we worked with employees to increase their understanding of what those policies were.
Thank you.
That answer your question?
Yes, sir.
I was just looking at this conduct outside of the workplace. That's
Dr. Cavazos, into your mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at this section, if I got it correct, conduct outside of the workplace. That's a pretty broad policy.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I understand that. I mean, all of this stuff is, I don't know, it just seems to me it's been violating people's individuals' privacy.
I think it is our belief that it is important for our employees to know that their conduct, whether in a school building at work or outside of a building or location that they work, might have an impact on their employment with the school division. And subsequent to that, we feel like we need to put that down in a policy so that everybody understands what the potential ramifications are.
All right, but I still disagree.
Questions or comments for Dr. Keever on this one? Mr. Riffle?
Could you point out the social media part in this? Is there like, is it, I just couldn't find it.
It's not line for line, but I can give you an example relative to.
I see social
It's really
networking.
section B where it talks about employee-student relations and the idea of communicating with students only for official purposes and refrain from personal nature, shall not provide students with access or invitations to personal social media accounts, etc. So that the pieces of the non-instructional use of social media really fall within section B.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Riffle?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to review it a little more, but yeah, I
Right,
appreciate it.
right.
Thank
We
you.
have
Yeah.
time to review all of these.
I just want to frame my review.
So you know where to look.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, are we ready to move past both of these then? 8.03 and 8.04? Okay.
Thank you. The next item is policy GCPA, reduction in workforce. This particular policy was last reviewed and revised in February of 2019. The revisions that we're bringing forward are to mirror the corresponding VSBA policy. The language of the reduction in force current policy, beginning on line 18 through line 152. We're recommending that come out of the policy and go into regulation. It's very specific language. It's language that potentially may need to be modified administratively, and whereby the current wording in a policy does not allow for that to occur. In practice, we are not recommending any change in how we might reduce the workforce. We are recommending a policy revision that puts the specificity of how that is accomplished in a regulation.
Okay. Any thoughts or questions on this one? No eye contact, so I think that's a no.
It's like being a teacher
Yeah.
in the classroom. Don't look up.
Do I
They
have to say
don't.
1, 2, 3 eyes on me, or? Okay, I think we can move on.
Yes, ma'am. The last, let's see, that's a G, okay. Let me tackle, if I could, 806 and 807 in a similar way to the ones I attempted a little bit earlier.
Okay.
We are recommending the creation of policy GBG, staff participation in political activities. We are recommending that creation because our current policy, KHE, which we're bringing forth revisions on, in our opinion, and then working with the policy committee, KHE was in two different places. We felt like KHE was giving some information in terms of how a candidate or candidates for office or political folks seeking political office may navigate working with the school division or utilization of the school division, but also then contained specific information to how an employee may or may not handle themselves in a political way. We felt like creating staff participation in political activities, which is GBG, and put that in the personnel section. It was geared very specifically to staff members who may be running for office or staff members who may be supporting and or participating in political campaigns. So if I could talk about KHE first, you'll note in KHE we are recommending striking lines 6 through 32. A great deal of that information will find its way into policy GBG or into a brand new regulation that we're bringing on around political leave, which would be regulation GCBD. We are adding the line in KHE, line 34 through 37, about the school board recognizing the importance of civic engagement. And we made some other updates in terms of legal references and policy references, cross references. The new policy that we're bringing forward, which is GBG, is derived from the VSBA model policy and then the current lines from KHE that we felt like needed to come out to separate and create a standalone for our personnel, for our staff. I'll pause there. That was quite a bit, and I'll be happy to try to answer questions.
Mr. Riffle.
Yeah, what's the penalty for this misconduct? Because it is kind of your judgment, or it's not us, the board. It's personnel, right? You all. So how is that?
So let me ask your question back then.
Sure,
the penalty on the staff policy or the penalty on KHE?
Like political participation, right? Like what would that look like as a penalty? Like, is it just stop doing that, or is it like, this procedure? What does that look? I'm new to this kind of actions of it, but
right. Part of the rationale for creating GBG was to create a specific item for personnel, so that we could explain what the expectations were for personnel related to political activity. So it would fall into a personnel category.
So you're saying it's punitive, or you're just saying it's cease and desist?
Well, I think it's tough to give a hypothetical, Dr. Cavasso. So I think that depending upon what the scenario might be,
Let's just say somebody's wearing a T-shirt with a name on it.
it depends on. Again, it's hypothetical. So I'd be whose name is it, and what does that name say? So what we've said is what the expectation is for staff relative to participating in advertising.
Right, so is it punitive, or is it just cease and desist? Just stop doing what you're doing, or is there a penalty? I think to Mr. Riffle's question, is it punitive?
Use a progressive process with our staff relative to interactions and personnel.
I don't know what that means.
Similar to the system that we use with students. So the first time we might ask someone to stop.
Okay.
The second time we might say, stop and here's a letter. The third time we might say, I'm going to suspend you from school as a student for a period of days. So that's a progressive response. We try to talk about, here's what the issue is as we see it, and here's a way to correct or address the issue.
And that's the same the same process you're going to use when you see a violation of this particular policy.
I think the intent is for us to be able to create a standard by which our employees understand their responsibility. And when employees don't live up to their end of the responsibility, we have an obligation as the employer to help them correct the behavior.
So it's going to be progressive.
I'm trying to answer you. I'm not trying to be obtuse. I'm trying to.
You are.
Well, I'm not trying to be.
Mrs. Donner.
Well, I think Dr. Cavazos, as I think about right in my corporate environment, it depends on the violation. So if it is an egregious violation, then progressive might mean you go to step 3. If it is something that is more mild, it might be step 1. And so I think like progressive discipline, at least as I've always done it at work, is that, right, it's kind of subjective to, or you have to understand what the policy violation is, and then you do things accordingly.
No, I understand what you're saying. I like to think that most folks who are in teaching aren't going to be engaged in some sort of very provocative conduct, but I mean, I just like to think that it's going to be more progressive than punitive. That's all I'm trying. That's the only point I want to make.
Understood.
May I ask an additional question?
Sure.
Would I know this is off? Political candidates are different than like somebody who's just a teacher who maybe says the wrong thing. I'm interested in seeing a fine for candidates actually in our division for making a mistake using this, because I think that's how you stop candidates from making mistakes, because that's how the state does it. And I'm interested in seeing an amendment. I don't know if there's an opinion on that at all from the board.
You're asking to implement a fine, a
A
monetary
for
fine
for someone who is a registered candidate in Virginia. I would like to see a fine for them violating this rule from the school board.
Okay.
Relative to KHE, or is this candidate also an employee?
They're employee, yeah. And if they're a candidate, you can do both, right? Like you can be an employee, you can be a substitute teacher who's running for school board. You can be, a teacher assistant who is running for the House of Delegates, right? They have laws that they go against, and like there's nothing here that stops them besides a little slap on the hand. Like I would like to see a fine that the Department of Elections has available to them. Like it's a power you can do, and I'd like to see that happen, because I think that's how you stop this type of stuff and stop politicizing like schools in that way.
I think
Using schools for gain in any type of issues. So
I think, Mr. Riffle, we're generally not in the business of fining people
Sure.
when they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing in the school context. So we would approach it more in a progressive manner, obviously, and say this is not appropriate, please don't do that. Then you go to another level of discipline, as Dr. Kiefer said, put a letter in their file. And at some point it becomes more than just what they did. It becomes the fact that they are refusing to comply with what we want them to do. So it becomes a more serious discipline issue. I don't see us, board of course could put it in their policy, but we're generally not in the business of giving fines for things.
when want some extra money,
We could do with an extra budget, absolutely.
These candidates can afford, I'm just saying it's a suggestion. I think that it would kind of alleviate the candidacy part of this problem.
And it's not an issue we have very often. It's not. We don't very often have a teacher or other member being a candidate for political office, but we generally deal with that in a different way. I don't think it would gain enough in the budget to make it worthwhile.
You want a pizza party fund?
So line number 25, it says display and distribution of political materials in the schools during school hours shall be restricted to those of an educational nature and as part of the educational program. Are they going to have equal sides, or is it just one side being presented? Line number 25.
You're in GBG?
Yes, sir.
I think it's important to say impartial and objective, and it's relevant to the course content. So am I teaching a lesson on democracy, or am I teaching a lesson on political parties, or is it a conversation about, it goes back to what the instructional idea for the day or the objective is for that particular day. So generally speaking, it ought to be impartial and related to the curriculum.
That's a big judgment call.
I think we're talking about the difference between, say, a math teacher who has a 2024 presidential sign that they just display that has nothing to do with the lesson, that they're just showing that the candidate they're supporting, versus a government teacher talking about we have a two-party system, and and currently these are the two people running for president, and that nature of
Right, we're
distinction.
tying it back to the instructional purpose, and I
Right.
think that's part of the reason that the language is added there, and that language itself is in the VSBA policy in terms of the model, and I feel like it might be coming out of KHE, so it might actually be our current policy. We just think it's in the wrong section.
Yeah.
We think it needs to come into the personnel section versus being the political activity section under community relations.
Ms. Ortego, I also think people should learn election statistics in math, so.
Okay.
I'm joking.
I took the wrong subject. So Is, Dr. Cavazos, are the terms impartial and objective not strong enough for you? Does that not cover your concern?
I just think I'm just make it none. I mean, because no matter how you slice it, in my opinion, when you present something, it's with a bias. I mean, if you could say you're going to talk about politics and political parties, I could pick the Democratic Party, or I could pick the Republican Party. All I'm saying is, I don't think any political materials should be allowed in schools, period. Whether it's impartial, whether it's part of an educational program, whether it's part of a math program, whatever. I don't think they should be allowed in the school at all. Because it seems to me there's no really true way you could present political material in an unbiased manner. Because by picking it personally, you're biased.
I think the curriculum in Virginia states you have to kind of do some of this stuff, so that would be pretty hard to, it's like there's SOLs on some of this things,
This is display and distribution of political materials. That's not the same thing as a textbook.
I think we need to follow Robert's rules and let the chair please
Sorry.
acknowledge.
Thank you. Do we have a better definition of what political materials that are educational in nature? Do you have examples outside of a civics class?
Not that I want to opine on here. I think that we have policies related to instructional materials and the use of instructional materials. I believe that there are objectives that we are bound to cover relative to teaching about political parties.
So any teacher that is displaying or distributing political materials that is not impartial, that is one-sided, would be in violation of this policy.
That is correct. And frankly, would be in violation of KHE right now.
Right.
Correct. Right. It is not a change in our practice.
Right.
What we are suggesting is that the current language in a policy about community relations that deals specifically with an employee's responsibilities and an employee's knowledge move into the personnel section where it's better fits.
Any other questions or concerns from board members? No? All right, we will move on. Oh, yeah, there's one more.
One more this evening, policy KNA, violent sex offenders on school property. It was adopted in September of 2010. We reviewed the VSBA model policy. KN, we've got a different naming convention at WJCC on this one from VSBA. We updated the code citation and the title to mirror the VSBA model policy. We are proposing some language changes to better align with VSBA. You'll note on line 18, we are putting that responsibility for notification on the school division versus the individual schools, because we feel like it needs to happen centrally and not necessarily put that burden on the individual school. There is not a change in our current practice with respect to sex offenders and crimes against minors registry information. We are making updates to this. We're actually taking a stricter interpretation whereby we are not listing out the various tiers associated with offense categories. We're saying if you have been charged and convicted, you have a certain obligation.
Okay, seems pretty straightforward. Any questions or concerns from board members on this? No? Okay, I think we are done with policies. So these will all be on the consent agenda next time. Is that okay, board members? Agreeing? Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to 9.01, approval of personnel actions. Can I have a motion, Mr. Hussein?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the personnel actions as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Hosang. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Riffle. Ms. Aller, when you're ready.
Mr. Hosang,
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley,
Aye.
Mr. Riffle,
Aye.
Dr. Cavazos,
Aye.
Ms. Chen,
Aye.
Mrs. Donner,
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye. All right, now moving on to 9.02, approval of adoption recommendation, purchase request, and budget transfer for grade K through 5 literacy core curriculum. Can I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the adoption recommendation of the benchmark advance for the grade K through 5 literacy core curriculum. The purchase request for a total cost of $1,293,040 and the associated budget transferring of $678,351 from the instructional salaries and benefits of instructional materials.
Thank you, Mr. Riffle. In mine, it says 679,351. Just wanted
You are
to
correct, sorry, yes.
make that correction. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Donner. Is there any discussion? I know this has been a topic that we've discussed a lot over the last 2 weeks, so, yes, Mr. Hosang?
Yes, at this time, I'd like to move to amend this motion. And I would strike the words benchmark advance and adding in their place bookworms reading and writing. I would also move to strike the amount of $1,293,040 and include the figure of $2,103,282.
Thank you, Mr. Hosang. Is there a second? I'm not hearing a second. All right,
I move the previous question.
so that will not be considered. We're back to the original motion. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Hunley?
Yes. So, back in the day when I was a teacher, I wanted to say thank you both to the teachers that came out and also to the committee for taking the time for curriculum. I remember serving on many curriculums, basically math and science at the time, and you either volunteered or you were voluntold. And I remember specifically during a math adoption when I was using Math Their Way and getting great results with my children, and we were moving to a math curriculum, and I went in kicking and screaming about the, all the work I had done with Math Their Way and the successes I had seen. And of course, I had to comply, and I didn't like the fact, having to hold that book in my lap to read through day by day lessons. And just seeing the growth that the students made, it was a learning opportunity for me. The process was a little different pre-COVID, I think. I was used to seeing names by the curriculum committee, and books were in our schools a little bit longer. That way we could have used some of the materials in there and, to see how it went. But other than that, one thing I heard was just not having access to the books for long periods of time. But I did go back and look specifically at the curriculum committee, and I was very impressed. There was, when you think there's 4 schools that have worked with bookworms, and then there were 5 schools that, were using other supplemental materials. There were 13 teachers on the bookworms, and there was also 13 I'll say 13 teachers within those 4 schools and 13 within the 5 schools. There were 9 highly trained specialists, administrators, literacy staff, and reading specialists. I also said before that I looked at this curriculum both through the eyes of a student, teacher, parent, and community stakeholders. I also looked at the emails that were sent to us, and between the two, School of 4 and the School of 5, it doubled from bookworms to the benchmark emails were double. I also reached out to former colleagues to see their opinions on both, and I talked with many of them. Now, of 2 schools, there were 2 definitely bookworm. The other 2 said that they would be happy with either curriculum. One school said they may have to support it a little bit more, but there were schools that did not respond. So three of the five schools sent emails to me, and only two from the other side. What impressed me about Benchmark was the diversity of the books, that there was fiction and nonfiction books. The 3-week unit did allow time to incorporate novels. I know that we've spent lots of money in our book rooms on novels. The goal settings for the students was very impressive to me at the beginning of their workbook, the student workbook, and then they also could see if they met their goal at the end. The classroom to kitchen table, I call that, like there was a, when the children bring the workbook home, parents could look at their workbook, see where they needed extra enrichment, and there was some activities that they could do. I liked the, believe it or not, technology, the digital portion in case a student was absent and needed to read the book from home. There was support for the EL students. I really like the 7 years of free workbooks. When I've served on committees before, we were told, you know, you get the workbook for a year and then you have to put them in sleeves, and it was awful, or a lot of Xeroxing. So I like that we have access to those workbooks for 7 years. Books were in the hands of every child, not having to, no children would have to share. I like the workbooks had graphic organizers and places for children to take notes. And some of the books incorporated science and social studies, which is very important to integrate all of those. They were far more comprehensive. The one thing that impressed me, the print was a nice size. It was bigger than usual. I liked the print. I don't know, that just makes reading a lot easier, I think, too, on the eyes. I feel it's more bang for our buck. Everybody in the division would be trained all together. It won't be like some people already have pieces of this and, you know, may have been trained one way. Everybody's getting trained, and I've heard that from the teachers as well. They want a curriculum where everybody starts at the same, and everybody's getting the same information, because sometimes we have kids to flow from school to school. There was seemed some schools felt like Bookworms, you could not use the novels, but I mean, Benchmark would not be using novels, but we did talk to a couple of people that said that you could incorporate those in there. I'm concerned about the copying budget. If you go with Bookworms and we have to copy a lot of material up front, and if any of you worked in school, and that's Xerox machine, I still call it Xerox, I'm old school, that thing goes down, it's a nightmare. And so, and it's very expensive. And then schools that may have to purchase extra books, that's an expense that will come out for them. Another thing was, there was a rating they had. It was called Bottom Line Comparison. It was a 0 to 6 rating. Bookworms fell a little short, so out of the rating, Bookworms had 30 and Benchmark had 35. So I want to make sure. And they fell short on the vocabulary, phonics, and the word study, and text reading fluency, and the development of comprehension. I can't believe we're getting all that we get with Benchmark. I think that's a plus because, again, I've always heard you don't get the fluff. Bookworms, the workbook was a little, it reminded me when I started teaching in 1980. It was kind of bland, and I just didn't think it was engaging for students' eyes. And I'll just say the 59% to 41%, clearly, I feel our staff has spoken that Benchmark is their choice, and so the percentages speak for themselves. And I just wanted to go on record as to what I saw.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hunley. Any other, Mr. Jose?
Yes. As everyone knows, I'm an attorney, and so what I do in my job is I have to have facts. I can't go forward with any case, any issue without facts or factual evidence. And I just want to go over some of the facts that we have regarding this process and really the two programs that we've been discussing mostly. Again, pursuant to the Virginia Literacy Act, we have to have a literacy instruction program this fall. And so, I mean, that's why we're here. That's a fact. VDOE has come forward with 7 different programs that school districts can choose from. So they've already gone through the process. They've already looked at these programs. Basically, all these programs meet their definition. It is our requirement now to figure out what is going to be best for our school district. Each school district is going to be different. There's been articles recently where there have been different school districts that have selected programs that we haven't even considered, or at least two that have been sort of recommended to us. So are we looking at bad programs? Are they looking at the better program? These are all programs, again, that VDOE has recommended and all that we should be able to consider. Again, the school districts are the ones that have to make that determination as to which one's going to be best for our district, not someone else's district. And again, so we've had, basically it boils down to two different programs that we're looking at, Benchmark and Bookworm. Benchmark has not been tried here. No teachers have tried it. No teachers have come forward and said that they've tried it here and it works. What teachers have done is they've looked at a piece of paper, looked at books and said this is going to be the better of the two processes. It's a hypothetical as to what they're looking at. We think this is going to work. And I'm not willing to put my name on something that people are saying we think is going to work. We have another program, Bookworm, that has been used. Again, it hasn't been used completely. I mean, it's just pieces or parts have been used for the past couple of years. It's tried here in our district in 4 different schools, and it's a success. All the teachers that we've talked to, all the teachers that have come forward to us have said it's been a success for their students. The students are willing to learn. They want to learn. They want to read. They've seen the enthusiasm in the students that they haven't seen before with Bookworm. So it's a proven commodity for our district. And I think that's what we're missing. There's some reports out there that I think it was the southwest parts of the country have tried Benchmark and have had great success. Great for them. But that's not Williamsburg, James City County. Williamsburg, James City County, the only thing that's been tried here is Bookworm. Again, we've received information where the students at the 4 schools that have used this version of Bookworm, they're all doing better. I mean, we've all received the charts where African American students are doing better, where economically disadvantaged students are doing better. English learners are doing better because of Bookworm. That's the program that they're using in those schools, and that's what's increasing those students' ability in their reading. Again, these are the facts. I mean, this isn't not hypothetical. These are facts that our students are learning with this program. And I think that's why I'm pushing it so hard, is that we've got those facts that this program is working for our district. And it's not a hypothetical. There's one other fact that we have in this measurement. And this is back from an email that the superintendent sent to us, I believe it was last Friday. Attached to that was documentation regarding this assessment. And it talks about SOL scores. And what does Virginia base every school on? SOL scores. That is, I don't want to use a word, but that's the benchmark that Virginia uses. But it's SOL scores. And what did we receive last week? That 3 of the 4 schools that use Bookworm, their SOL scores increased. Only 2 of the schools that weren't using Bookworm increased in their scores. So again, these are facts that this program is working for Williamsburg, James City County. It's working for our district. It may not work for York County. It may not work for Richmond, but obviously it's working here. We have teachers that are telling us it's working here. When we all started, when we ran for office or when we applied in Williamsburg to become a member, one of the things that I believe we all said in talking to each other was, we're here for the students. We're here to make sure the students get the best education they can. Ignore what our school board has said. Ignore what the teachers have said. Ignore what the administration has said. And look what the students have said. They've said with the SOL scores that Bookworm is what they like. Bookworm is what gets through to them. And for that reason, I'm going to be recommending or not voting to approve Benchmark, but I still want to look at an approved Bookworm because that is the program right now that's working for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jose. Are there any other comments from board members? Dr. Cavazos?
So I've got just basically very few comments. The benchmark criteria achieves three goals, I believe. Well, there's three aspects of it that I very quickly want to discuss, and one of it has to do with teacher recruitment. To Ms. Hunley's point, apparently some of these programs, reading programs, take a lot of preparation, and what we need to do is encourage teachers to come here knowing that they don't have to have a big workload, and we don't want to lose teachers because they have a big workload. So seemingly Benchmark solved that problem. And I want to thank the due diligence of the committee members that seemingly did a lot of work and are far more experienced in this realm. And so I would bow to their recommendation in some sense. I do think that what's important also is that there's this huge economic gap. And I can't speak for Bookworms, but apparently there's some component of the Benchmark program that will direct programs to the non-English speaking students. And so I think if we have any chance of closing the economic gap, that particular instrument may be what we need. But fundamentally, overall, the challenge from me is to reach a 90% SOL proficiency test result by 2027, 2028. I think that it's paramount that every single third grade student be able to read. It needs to be proficient. And I'm looking at these numbers here, and this is not, it's not 90%, and I feel strongly that it needs to be 90%.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Mrs. Donner, did you have a comment?
Sure. We received a lot of emails over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and so I just want to thank everyone, all of the teachers who spent time emailing us and sharing their thoughts. And there were some questions as to why we tabled the vote last meeting, and I think it's just as Mr. Hosang has said, Dr. Cavazos and others, Mrs. Hunley, that this decision is just so important for our students, and it really will affect almost a generation of the kids that are coming through, where we will get these children over the next few years, those that are still in elementary school and those that are coming, and this will affect how well they do in middle school and high school. And so as a board, for us, it is that important that we fully understand, because most of us are not educators like Mrs. Hunley that are familiar with the materials, that understand what's the implication for being handed a kind of a box that has a full curriculum in it, being able to create your own materials. And so I think it was just really important for us as a board to just take a step back and pause so that we fully understood what we were doing. I think as in subsequent conversations with Dr. Herron and her staff, it was a good reminder for me that what we're doing here isn't new to our organization. Like, we've started with K through 2, and so some of those PAL scores that we saw last year, where we had recovered with the second graders from pre-pandemic levels, and then we're expecting to see greater increases in third grade, is because we did start doing science of reading with that group, and so this is now expanding it to others within our division. For me as a board member, I have a dyslexic child, and so she, struggled with reading because, she's a pandemic kid, was a kindergartner, and so didn't get caught that she was dyslexic, and the ways that kids were being taught to read with pointing to things in the book and some of the balanced literacy did not work for her. And so she was one of those third graders that Dr. Cavazos talks about who was not on grade level. And so as that, and as a mom of a dyslexic child, and understanding how important science of reading is, and how important it was for her to be able to read a book. Like she's like, Mommy, I want to read a chapter book. That was the most important thing to her. And so listening to the teachers talk about bookworms and how important it was for their children to be able to have novels and develop this love of learning was really important to me, and I appreciate that. I also had to balance what others have said about you're walking into a division, and for the average teacher, that some of them are also working through other jobs or trying to balance families or other obligations. What is their opportunity to be able to supplement and build out the curriculum in a way that is going to benefit all the children, and making sure that we have a kind of a baseline. And so the way that I've thought about benchmark is right from the analogy of jazz. It gives you the music and the melody of what the song is supposed to be like. We're all playing for the same sheet of music. And then our teachers are allowed to then improvise off of that and put in their own flair and their own style and their own instruments. And so for our teachers who have created materials with bookworms, there is novel study, and that is not lost. For our teachers that have other materials and the books and classroom sets we have bought, that is not lost. And so after having really deep conversations with experts at William and Mary, with teachers, with our own teacher on the board, with seeing the materials, reading the emails, I'm in support of Benchmark because it is that baseline structure that we will allow our teachers to riff off of.
Thank you, Mrs. Donner. Any other comments?
I'll just make a brief comment. I do appreciate the board coming together and agreeing that we should take some more time on this issue. So I'm glad that we are at a point where we can decide. I will point out that I think many of us needed the time to understand the process. I do want to thank the selection committee. I recognize that this was quite a lot of work without any additional compensation or appreciation, I'm sure, to come together and make this decision. As far as the results from the elementary teacher selection decision, based off of 243 teachers that could have responded, it would have been nice if they had had more time, as Mrs. Hunley had already pointed out, more time to engage with the material, to have time to use it, but I don't think that was a brilliant option. And then based on those results, I believe it's 47%, so 114 out of 243 is 47% of teachers chose Benchmark Advance, 33% chose Bookworms, and 20% did not respond. So I think that really is 53% of our elementary teachers that need some convincing to engage, not because they're not already putting, it's really the onus is on us to get buy-in, to really get them excited if we're going to move forward and we're going to implement this and it's going to be a success. Also, I'll point out that it's not just Benchmark. I think it adds more resources to teachers who really need it and have wanted it, and something we haven't had in our division. So Mrs. Hundley and I, we have been to 2 elementary schools and in the last 2 weeks, and Mr. Hosing and I, we saw You Fly phonics in action. There's a lot of enthusiasm for You Fly, so that's just mentioning that is another example of we have books, we have libraries out there, so there's lots of resources, and so I see Benchmark Advance as adding to that and giving our teachers more support.
Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Ms. Hundley?
Said one more thing to say. A lot goes into reading success, math success, social studies, and I ran on smaller class sizes, and I do know that smaller class size and extra, support really helps students in any academic. And so I wish that, I think sometimes our larger schools, I was at Stonehouse, 7 of us on a team. I had 5 reading groups, 5. And then to see a neighboring school with 15 kindergartners, 2 reading groups, yeah, they could really get, to things that and extra support. So I don't think it's all just a program. I think it's having small class size, the right people on the team, enthusiasm, and that's what beefs it up. I'm concerned with having novice teachers versus new teachers, as what was said here. I could do it with my eyes closed, but a new person coming in cannot. And we cannot let a teacher from 0 to 5 years struggle with not having a curriculum and expect them to pull stuff together. It's hard to do. And that's all I have. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hundley. And I'll say just a few words, just on behalf of myself. This board took this very seriously, and I do want to thank my board colleagues for unanimously deciding to delay just temporarily. I think we understood the significance of this as a change for the whole division, and wanted to make sure that we fully understood all the ramifications, everything that went into the process, everything that was going to come out of the process. We were not and still are not choosing sides amongst groups of teachers or schools. And even though I did wrestle with a lot of different components of this over the last 2 weeks, and I have friends who are teachers who called me and said, please don't do this and please do this, and it's hard. But what it came down to me is, for me, is that as a board, our job is to set a goal and an expectation and let staff decide how they're going to meet that and then hold them accountable. That's our role as a board. So we are not literacy experts, maybe Mrs. Hundley is, but the rest of us are not. And so our job is not to determine how that should work, especially looking at an entire division with 9 elementary schools. Our job is to set a goal and set an expectation and expect that it be met. So that's how it came down. That's what it came down to for me. And the bottom line is that this board expects results. I think that's what we are all getting at. We expect results for our students. 3rd graders have to be able to read. We want children to learn the joy of reading and real books and whatever it takes to get there. No one wants to see children not read real books or have the experience of those who maybe struggle being able to read the same book as their peers. I know that for me, another important component, as Dr. Cavazos has mentioned, is the reduction of the achievement gap. We don't want to merely allow children to progress and grow without ever catching up. And so I'm looking forward to seeing those results over the next few years, and hoping that the standard curriculum will meet that goal. Also wanted to address a lot of the emails that we got seem to indicate that we were hesitant to adopt a district-wide or division-wide curriculum at all, that we didn't see the merits of everything being standardized, and that's not true. I don't think any board member ever thought that we shouldn't have that or don't need it. So I just wanted to make that clear, that was never a question in our minds. I do think that we've been able to talk about how novel studies can be incorporated. Perhaps at the end, Dr. Heron will say a word or two about that. But at the end of the day, I think what Mrs. Hundley said is true, that one of the main reasons that some of the schools that were mentioned before were having so much success is because of the teachers. They took initiative on their own. They created reading guides. They tried new things, and they found success. And that's certainly to be commended and applauded. And so to those, I want to say, we see you, we thank you, well done. And I hope that in some capacity that can still continue with additional support for teachers who have not been able to have that experience yet. So those were the considerations that I had. And then I would like to ask you to talk about the incorporation of novel studies.
Sure, absolutely. But I do want we value every single teacher in our school division, and I certainly value the incredible work that's been done in creating novel studies and the guides for those studies. It was training that we put sets of great novels in every classroom. We provided the guides to study those. Some teachers went out and chose other novels that were their favorites and created more guides. There will be, and those were modeled on what bookworms, what the process and the structure of those reading guides. Those guides we can still use. You take your typical literacy block, and there's 10 minutes of shared reading at the beginning. We're hoping every teacher is doing read aloud in their classroom and on a regular basis. There's 30 minutes in addition to that in the reading block where you can continue with independent shared readings, going back to that reading of the novel and giving students opportunities to delve into some of those structured guides that we've used already. So we're going to start communicating, we're going to start reaching out, we're going to make sure that everyone understands that the work that has been done by those teachers, creating their own units around guided reading, we will be able to use them in the classroom still. We want students to enjoy reading, that's why we're here. That's our reason to be. And I do believe the benchmark curriculum will provide a foundation in so many other aspects as well, but we will be able to incorporate the work already done. And in fact, I'd go a step further and say some of those wonderful guides that teachers have created, we want you to share them with other schools. We want others to be able to use them too, so that it's not just in 4 schools, but we can use them across the system as well, because we know they're well done and we know they can be used in one piece as we move forward. So please know we value this as not a them or us. I hope we're all in it together for every single student in our school division. And I do believe this will be a foundation to set us on a course to make a significant difference in literacy scores. It's only one piece of the puzzle. The excellent teacher in every classroom is the strongest piece of the puzzle. And it's not just a program, and a program will never change things. It's the practices that the teachers bring to teaching reading that will make the difference. Practices, not programs. And just thank you for your patience as we've tried to provide more information that perhaps we could have provided up front. This was a learning experience for me as well, as a superintendent with a new board, and giving context before we pushed into a major decision with you. So I own that one, and certainly we will do everything we can to make that better moving forward as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. All right. I'm guessing there's no further discussion, but is there any last comment before we move to approve? The motion on the floor? Zoller?
Mr. Riffle.
Aye.
Dr. Cavazos.
Aye.
Ms. Chen.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Mr. Hosang.
No.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
And Mrs. Ortego.
Aye. All right. Now we are moving into board member comments. We just made a lot of comments, but if there's any other closing comments, I'll just start over here, Mr. Riffle.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank the board. I think allowing the time for the 2 weeks just allowed me to hear from some positive things in my inbox. I think I work in an industry where people just kind of tell me no a lot, like, don't know, and I was like, I really was excited to see teachers give their personal story, like why they voted a certain way in their own school and things like that. So, and I also want to say thank you to the teachers who did tell us to vote no. I think that's important as well. This is kind of the point of democracy and the point of having right representation and things. But this curriculum is supposed to help us get back to pre-pandemic levels. Like, it's not supposed to keep us moving in a way. Like, we're lucky to have a school system around here that's pretty decent after pre-pandemic. Like, this is a miracle they pulled off. And there's other divisions around Virginia that do not have these numbers. So it's like, I think giving us a pat on the back is pretty important in this part. This resource is important. I think teachers are essential to this, but the resource is important to have. Like, we don't have this in every school, right? Like, this is why I voted yes. And so I just want to say thank you to our educators. Thank you to the team who kind of presented us with the Robins for dealing with our badgering and questions. It was important to me, and I'm glad I didn't share my remarks earlier because I knew we'd have public time though. Well, I already gave my remarks earlier about this Student Advisory Committee, so thank you, and I look forward to the House and Senate passing budgets this Thursday. So,
Thank you, Mr. Riffle. Mr. Hosang, any closing remarks?
Just very quickly, just wanted to, I guess, thank the administration. I don't know if they're the right ones to thank regarding us being able to go to the conference COSBA. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right either. But it was a great conference. It was great material, great small group sessions that we could attend. And so, as a new board member, I just wanted to thank the administration for allowing us to be able to attend training like that.
Thank you, Mr. Hosang.
Okay, you helped me refresh. It's COSPA. So COSPA. So you helped me, so I helped you.
So many different ways there.
I enjoyed COSPA too. We miss Miss Chen, and she'll be with us next year. I like just getting to know board members, and there's always some little in-house funny stuff like Dr. Beers dancing, me with the napkin. I won't live that down. And hi, Dan. He won't live down.
I understand.
So anyway, he understands where I'm going. But we had a great time. Just learning. And so also at COSPA, one thing, we went to a reading, Science of Reading, and they said do not ditch a curriculum after, the first year you may not see results, second or third, and then people think the third year we're not doing it, it's not working. But if you do that fourth year, then you start seeing it. And for us to get all this free stuff for 7 years, that makes me feel really positive. It's not free.
I don't think it's free.
$1.2 million.
What's access? It's free once.
Well, okay, you all get. So, went to War Hill with Mr. Hossain, and we had a great tour. I have given Miss Aller, the foreign language department, is going to do this big buffet with all kinds of foods from Germany, everywhere, so I can't go. I'll be out of the country, but she's going to get that to everybody because they did invite us. Second, Miss Chin and I went to Matthew Whaley, and we were joined by the mayor and vice mayor, so that was different. And then CBB, I went to see Bright Beginnings, and they were excited with Miss Chen again, and they were excited about the new building that's coming. And then yesterday, I actually got invited to go with Jamestown High School African American History students and the AP Art students to Richmond, to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. It was a collaboration. But this is the most impressive thing. There was a teacher driving the bus, the science teacher, and all I could think of is that's Miss Frizzle, right? Y'all know who Miss Frizzle is, right?
Magic School.
The Magic School Bus. And this is exciting because y'all know I bought my bus before. So I believe that bus put out some good karma. There are 2 other teachers waiting in the wings to get trained, right, Mr.? 2 other teachers who'll be driving buses. So there you go. So,
It's just nice.
so anyway, that was new to me. I had never been on a bus where a teacher drove the bus, and she did her name was Miss Elton. She did a fabulous job. I wasn't nervous, afraid, or anything. So anyway, that's my comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Hunley. Ms. Chen.
I had mentioned earlier the school visit, so thank you for having us, Matthew Whaley and Claire Bird Baker and Tuano Middle School. And also I thank the city council members who joined us at Matthew Whaley. I think many of us will be back at Matthew Whaley tomorrow to do our Read Across America in the classrooms. And also we have some school board visits coming up to Berkeley Middle School and Lafayette High School. So I've thoroughly and wholeheartedly enjoyed being in the buildings and seeing our students, seeing how engaged they are, and it has been very encouraging. So just want to shout out to our students and thank you that they're showing up, and to the parents and the families and also to the teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. Dr. Cavazos?
Just two real quick things. I think Ms. Chen brought up a very, very important topic, and that was enthusiasm for a reading program. And I look forward to who is going to lead our literacy program. I think there needs to be somebody who's heading some sort of campaign to let everybody know that this division is absolutely positively 100% behind a high rate of literacy for the division. It can't be just teachers doing what they're doing. I think the school bus drivers, the cab drivers, the people who sweep the floor, everybody needs to understand that literacy is paramount. And second of all, I was invited to James River Elementary School, and I met a wonderful young lady by the name of Angel Washington. I was thoroughly impressed with her presentation about her challenge. The majority of the students in that school are minority. And if you talk about an economic gap, if you guys close that, that would be an exceedingly great task accomplishment.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Mrs. Donner?
I just think it is what we have done here today by passing a K-5 reading literacy curriculum is huge, and it's huge for our division. And I just don't want that lost. And I think we recognize that as a board, and we are excited for the teachers to put something in your hands that you'll be able to use. In terms of fun things, I was able to go to Lafayette and cheer on the girls basketball team as they were vying for state championship. They came so close. But from what I understand, those girls will be together next year. So Meridian, watch out. We're coming for you.
That's it. Thank you, Mrs. Donner. Just in closing, I will mention that Mrs. Hunley and I went to Hornsby Middle School. And I know, she didn't mention me.
I'm sorry.
All that, and I didn't get even a shout out.
Apologize.
We had a wonderful tour with Dr. Ellison, and she spent a lot of time with us, and we saw many very impressive things. And I came away from that school just feeling like the feeling of positivity was palpable, and so that was my takeaway. And I think that starts at the very top of that school and trickles all the way down. So that was very great. Just in closing about this process that we went through for 2 weeks, I just want to thank everybody who participated in this this decision process, starting from the review committee all the way up to tonight. There was a tremendous amount of work that went into the review. We value everyone that sat on that committee, that participated. We value every teacher that weighed in. We value every teacher that spoke up and said that what they were happy about with the recommendation. We value everyone who said what they weren't happy about and why. We need all of those voices to help us put together a full picture to help us make an informed decision. And that's just part of the process. The board approval is part of the process. It's the end, but it's part of the process. And I want to thank my board colleagues for really having thoughtful conversations and really giving it a lot of thought, having, different opinions at different times. And even tonight, we heard a very different voice from Mr. Hosang than the rest of us, but that's great. That's great to hear that voice and amongst all the voices. I want to thank staff, because we asked a lot of questions. and we know that was maybe more than expected, more than usual. It's just a reflection of the fact that we took it seriously, and it wasn't that we didn't trust the work of the committee. It was that we actually wanted to honor the work of the committee and honor the work of the teachers that were unhappy with the recommendation, by doing our own work as well. Because if we had just brushed by it and after a few minutes of a presentation and had not understood the weight of everything that went into it, I think that would have done a disservice to everyone who was involved up until that point. So with that, I just want to say I'm glad we came to a resolution. And thank you, Dr. Herron, for bearing with us and your patience and guiding us through through this process from your end. So, and that is all I have. So we will talk about upcoming meetings. Special Education Advisory Committee will meet on March 14th at 6:30 p.m. in room 300 here in the annex. Policy Committee on March 20th at 8:30 a.m. in room 203 of the School Board and Central Office. And the Career Ready Advisory Committee on March 27th at 3:30 p.m. here in room 300 of the annex. Upcoming meetings. We will be having a joint meeting with our funding partners on March 15th at 8:30 a.m. at the Stryker Center, 412 North Boundary Street in Williamsburg, Virginia. Closed session on March 19th will begin at 6 p.m. here in room 300 of the annex, followed by a regular meeting also on March 19th at 6:30 p.m. in James Blair Middle School Gymnasium. And then a closed session on April 9th will begin at 4 p.m. here in room 300 of the annex, followed by a work session and action items also on April 9th at 4:30 p.m. here in room 300 of the annex. Our agenda is set for the next regular meeting. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.